Hey everybody, it's Dr. Ron. Again, I'm here with Dr. Incrementa, and we are at his interventional pain center and spine center here in Texas, and really want to focus on something that's been in the media a lot, and that's hemp oil, phytocannabinoids, CBD, whole nine yards, right? And so I'll tell you that in my clinical practice, we have a lot of people use it for a lot of things other than chronic pain, but just diving deep into the chronic pain, there are people who have been successfully taken off of antidepressants and ADHD medication, narcotics, and Tylenol and Advil and all these particular things when they start using hemp oil. And this is an interesting time to talk about it with the new 2018 Farm Bill about to be signed, allowing the growth of industrial hemp. Now, so I think the most important part that I learned, being a practitioner who have people on hemp oil, is that these things act very fast.
Right.
And not only do they act fast, people don't need it forever.
Right.
When they start using hemp and phytocannabinoids, you saturate their cannabinoid receptors, a lot of things get better, more than just pain. And then ultimately they can use less and less and less. And sometimes they have what's called a maintenance dose, and they'll use like very, very little, or most people actually just start tapering off and use as needed. We don't see this with any type of medication. We don't see it with pain medicine, we don't see it with Tylenol, we don't see it with Advil, we don't see it with any of these things, and we don't see it with steroids either, right? And so let's talk about the place of these particular supplements, these phytocannabinoids in pain medicine. Where do you see phytocannabinoids going in terms of acute or chronic pain?
Sure. So there's quite a bit of research out there regarding the saturation of the receptors and the analgesic effects of cannabinoids. In fact, there was a lecture just recently at the Texas Pain Society over at the Lost Pine Center, and essentially there's strong research that advocates for the utilization of these cannabinoids to help control pain. Now, what is the application? A lot of patients are mentioning hemp oil topically, sublingually. There's a huge variety of different uses, and it just depends on what you're trying to treat.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's so many companies out there that are putting all sorts of different things. And what we're talking about really is not medical marijuana. We're not talking about medical marijuana. We're talking about hemp oil from industrial hemp that either has no or a trace amount of THC in it that's either undetectable or very, very little. And the reason we're focusing on that is because that type of therapy generally doesn't really have any side effects. We can load people up with these and saturate the receptors and they're fine. But we're talking about medical marijuana or marijuana in general with THC and tetrahydrocannabinoid with THC is what gets you high. Those have a lot of different side effects.
Absolutely.
Dry mouth, we've got the cotton mouth thing, cyclical vomiting syndrome is something that we see a lot with those.
Absolutely.
And then for those who are schizophrenic, they can make their schizophrenia worse than paranoia. So I'm not a really big fan of medical marijuana per se, but there's other phytocannabinoids in the hemp plant that's very useful. So in the hemp plant, you have these cannabinoids, right? And then THC is what makes people high. And then there's CBD cannabidiols, the CBG cannabigerols, and all these other particular phytocannabinoids, CBV, CBBV, and delta-9 THC, and all these different phytocannabinoids and terpenes make up the entire plant. But what I'm finding in research is that there's a lot of studies on the other components of hemp oil that's far beyond just CBD, far beyond just the THC, that has its own protective effects. Anandamide is one of the most heavily studied. It's a natural phytocannabinoid. Huge implications in pancreatic cancer, breast cancer. CBG, cannabigerol, is actually a precursor to THC and CBD. And that has its own implication in multiple sclerosis, Huntington's disease in animal models. It's actually more potent than CBD for anti-inflammatory. And so I think what we're talking about really is the whole hemp plant and how it has a beneficial effect for the body as an anti-inflammatory and everything like that. But why do you think that we get the effect that when people use it a lot in the very beginning, they don't need it anymore, rather than them building up a tolerance like everything else that we have?
Right, and so I mean that's a great question. I don't think anybody has the answer to that yet, but I could guess, and I would say that it's probably related to the way that there's a neuroplasticity response in the brain, and what neuroplasticity is essentially like if somebody has a stroke and then their hand goes limp, and then all of a sudden, like 6 months later, they can start moving their hand a little bit, or they're slowly gaining function back, even though that part of the brain is defective. The same way, if you go based on like the homunculus model of the brain mapping of pain, you can actually shrink pain centers in the brain, and it can help reset the way that the brain perceives pain. And after the brain has had a chance to kind of hit the reset button, or kind of go back to when the patient was living their life without pain, the brain now has a new way of thinking about pain and experiencing it and processing it. And that's why, based on what your research is and what your background experience is with patients, and based on my understanding of neuroplasticity, I would project, or I would hypothesize that is the mechanism of action, is actually the neuroplasticity response. I could guess that it would have a chance to reset. The brain now has experienced life without pain, or life with a augmented perception or augmented level of pain, and that could potentially lead to the kind of the cliff that you don't need it anymore.
Yeah, interesting. You're right. I don't think I know either why that happens. I think that's a really good theory, and actually, latest studies shown that we can actually grow back neural tissue, like on the CAT scans,
right, with
people using phytocannabinoids.
Exactly.
And you can see the brain grow back. And I mean, that's a fascinating concept to me. I think another portion is it's a natural anti-inflammatory, and it's a natural stem cell upregulator. So what happens is that we see that in animal models that you can have increased circulating stem cells after the use of hemp oil. So there is a regenerative effect that's happening in the background.
Right.
And I think neuroplasticity is part of that regeneration. So that's neuroregeneration. And I think that the body can regenerate other different things beyond just the brain. We know that hemp oil is an NRF2 upregulator in the liver, so that's part of the sort of the detox and anti-aging mechanism that happens systemically. And we know that the saturation of cannabinoid receptors is able to bring the body back into that balance. If you're too far left, brings it right. If you're too far right, brings it left. And you can see that in a lot of cells that have markers for what's called mitochondrial dysfunction. Basically, the energy units of each cells get disrupted, and you can see that coming back for each of the cells. Doesn't matter which way it goes. So now we're talking about these cannabinoids at the cellular level, right?
Which is, it's amazing, and I think that's some of the things that right now. It's December of 2018. And research studies are just flying off the press.
Oh, yeah.
Every day there's something new in the newspaper and medical journals. Did you happen to come across that one where they just found out that you can actually get mitochondrial DNA from your father now?
Oh, because I did not know that.
Up until like a couple months ago, it was
for the mother.
It was taken as gospel and prophecy that this is, you get your mitochondria from your mom. Period. End of story. And they just had a recent publication. They're finding you can actually inherit some from your father too.
That's interesting.
So like you said, and like we were talking about earlier, nobody knows. But this is a really exciting time for medicine. It's a really exciting time for hemp oil and regenerative medicine. And there's a huge void in the healthcare industry of natural healing. So far it's all been focused on pharma and surgeries and implants and prosthetics, and you know what? I went to med school and I trained in that, and there is a place for that. If my child has an infection and they're in the hospital and they're having fevers and all of the natural treatments have failed, you know what? They're getting antibiotics.
Absolutely.
You know, the same way, if you fracture your arm, I'm going to send you to a surgeon. He's going to put some screws and plates in there and fix it. But at the end of the day, we're working at the cutting forefront of this regenerative medicine and natural medicine approach treatment. So you know, it's just an exciting time for all of us.
It really is exciting. And so let's talk about narcotics. So there's a lot of people on narcotics and other chronic pain medicines, even Tylenol and aspirin and Aleve. They're not the greatest things, you know, especially on the liver and the GI tract, right?
Absolutely.
What do you think this hemp industry is going to have an impact in terms of on decreasing narcotic and other medicine use?
So it's not what I think, actually. It's actually what researchers are coming out from Colorado.
Awesome. Yeah.
Where they've legalized use of certain types of marijuana, and they're actually showing a decrease in the usage of opioids. Believe it or not. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, you know, we like to see that nationwide, because narcotics, unlike cannabinoids, you have to use more and more and more and more to get the same effect.
Correct.
Cannabinoids, you can start out with a whole lot and then ultimately you can decrease, and that's pretty much a universal thing I see with my patients, right? And the other thing is that, you know, these hemp oil, like non-THC or low THC ones, you know, the worst you can have is probably a headache, I would say. I don't have a lot of people reacting to them, although you have to be careful what you pick. There's a lot of smoke shop with CBD that's supposedly non-THC that actually has some, and so you require some research and requires certificates of analyses from the companies to understand what you're really putting into your body.
Correct. And
they're labeled hemp oil or CBD oil, and even though CBD is just one of the 125 something cannabinoids that are there, a lot of times they label CBD oil, so the labeling, there's not a congruency to it.
Right.
I think, you know, in in December of 2018, there's going to be some congruency pretty soon after the Farm Bill is signed into law. But I think the most important thing to understand is that people don't really need to be afraid of something like this, because it can be a good thing.
And let me add another point, because, you know, I dearly do love the medical research and the medical industry and pharmaceutical companies making headway, because they were initially, pharmaceutical companies were pharmacists and doctors, sitting around just as we are, coming up with things. Now, one point I'd like to make very clear and very interesting is that one of the biggest manufacturers of sublingual fentanyl for cancer patients, well, guess what they're doing now?
Buying up hemp plots.
They've made an aerosolized version of medical grade marijuana.
Oh wow!
And so this is like one of the nation's largest. You know, they made the strongest possible opioid you can get, and guess what they're onto now? And there's something behind that.
Right, that's amazing. Of course, we just know that in the end of 2018 right now, there's phase 1 clinical trials of another drug that's coming out that's a CBG derivative, cannabigerol derivative. And but what's interesting about these drugs is that they are just the particular phytocannabinoid that's there. That's not the full spectrum.
Right.
So there's something to be said about the full spectrum. You know, my mom is a herbologist and Chinese medicine doc, and she always says, when you take the chemical out of the herb, you get side effects. You get some issues, right? So, you know, there's Sativex from Europe, and there's other synthetic cannabinoids that are there that are in the pharma world that has specific side effects that are associated with it. But generally, if you're taking it as a whole hemp and phytocannabinoid, I don't see them in clinical practice. I really don't. And I talked with a pediatrician who sees a lot of autistic kids and uses a lot of phytocannabinoids on them, not the THC, but the non-THC versions with the hemp oil, and they get some pretty good effects. And they're using higher doses than I see in adults.
Right. And
there's some pretty good doses as well. So, and you know, in my mind, look, talk about the safety of this. In my mind, looking at non-THC formulations, okay, it's safer than taking vitamin D or zinc or copper or other minerals from over the counter. Why? Vitamin D, you can get vitamin D toxic. If you take too much copper, it can deplete your zinc and other levels and causes major neuropathic issues.
Right.
If you take zinc, you can deplete your copper, and you can also get zinc toxicity, taste changes, and other neurological issues, chronic pain. And these are things that I see people overtaking as well. If you take too much vitamin B6, it could be a major issue as well, right? And so all of these things have a toxicity effect to it. They're very much over the counter. We don't talk about it because they're just not exciting as hemp, I guess. But I think the safety from these other phytocannabinoids is awesome. It's very safe. You don't get a whole lot of toxic effects. And I think people should really try it if they have chronic pain. Now, it's considered, for most hemp oil in this country, it's considered a dietary supplement, so you can literally just get it either online or anything like that. And you have big companies that are out there that's supplying hemp oil, and even more hemp oils coming out. There's hundreds of hemp oil companies coming out. And I think the most important thing to understand is that you have to know where you're getting. Something in a bag from a smoke shop down the street is not going to do it unless you have a certificate of analysis for that particular batch. And I think we can really win this battle against narcotics in the long run, and really looking at phytocannabinoids for doing that.
Yeah, I mean, and just to go off of your point, the other day I was speaking with one of the PhD pharmacologists, and he had mentioned to me that if Tylenol and acetaminophen were invented today, they would actually be prescription drugs because their side effect profile is so bad and their overdose risk is so high.
Wow, so that's crazy.
I know, and we just take it for granted.
Yeah, Tylenol toxicity is one of the main causes of liver failure in the United States.
It is, absolutely. And
it's one of the main causes of liver transplants in the United States.
Yes, absolutely.
And NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories like ibuprofen and Aleve and stuff like that, they're the main cause of stomach ulcers and bleeding ulcers in the emergency room.
So let's end it on an excited note that the future is here.
Yeah.
We're talking about regenerative medicine. We're talking about hemp oil and natural treatment options that don't involve addictive and potentially deadly chemicals. I think the future is here, and we're super excited about it. Super excited. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. Comment below if you have any questions. Like and share this, of course, with your friends and neighbors and whoever it is that you hang out with, and we'll talk soon. So thank you, Dr. Mehta. Thanks.